Pete here from the Lasser Cast, and I am with my very good friend, Mr. Dr. Zayas God, Danny Torkel. Good morning, Danny.
What's going on? How are you?
I am super excited because I got a chance to rewatch Drag Me to Hell, which I saw in theaters when it first came out. I
Same.
was a big fan of this movie, and since we are doing our Road to Evil Dead Rise, which comes out April 21st, I figured that we should talk about a movie of Sam Raimi's that feels very much like the Evil Dead movie, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah. Like I watched it with Charlotte last night, and I kept telling her, "Trust me, this movie is very Evil Dead like." And we're 20 minutes in. She's like, I kind of see it. And then I think it was the moment where there's a dream sequence that the nasty gypsy woman vomits like maggots and worms onto Alison Lohman's face. And
Yes.
Charlotte was like, oh, okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
And it just got progressively more Evil Dead-ish. Uh, this is like a glorious return to form for Sam Raimi.
Yes.
And I'm really happy that he got to make this movie. And I kind of hope that, you know, it's weird. His career has been, okay, Evil Dead for the
Mm-hmm.
first decade of his career.
Mm-hmm.
Then he kind of went off and did a couple more interesting projects. Then he got adopted by Marvel, and he created one of the. I don't think it's a. I don't think it's a stretch even now, 20 something years later, to say that Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 are two of the most important and best comic book movies ever made.
What about Spider-Man 3, baby? Hmm?
I think Spider-Man 3 has moments.
Yeah.
But yeah, the less said about it as a whole, the better. We all
Okay.
know, though, that he was dealing, very similar to Jon Favreau. He got with Iron Man 2.
Mm-hmm.
Jon Favreau directed Iron Man, basically started the MCU. And then almost immediately it was like, look, everything you did was perfect. So here's everything we need you to change for the next movie. And he was like, oh, I don't know about this. And so
Right.
he kind of dropped off after Iron Man 2 and basically just, he was acting in the movies. He was like, I think, assisting with scripts and producing. But he kind of like gave up the director's chair and was like, you guys take it where you want to take it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Raimi realized that after Spider-Man 3, like, I got to get the hell out of here. And I think that this was almost a way, Drag Me to Hell was a way to cleanse his palate after a decade in the pre-MCU Marvel verse comic book movies.
Yeah.
He did 3 Spider-Mans over a 7-8 year stretch. His last movie before Spider-Man was The Gift, which was a very different kind of horror movie.
Yes.
I only saw that once, not even in theaters. I was even thinking, doing some research, I was like, I need to rewatch The Gift. I was a huge Katie Holmes fan. I watched Dawson's Creek, had a huge crush on her when I was a teenager. So I was like, ooh, I got to go see The Gift. And then I saw it and I was like, it was okay.
Right.
But now I feel like I appreciate it more as an adult.
Right.
But yeah, like, he makes The Gift, then he goes into the spot. And before The Gift, actually, he does his only completely non-genre film, a baseball love story called For the Love of the Game, starring Kevin Costner, which there was a stretch where Sam Raimi did For Love of the Game. And I think the same year or within the same year and a half period, Wes Craven directed Music of the Heart starring Meryl Streep.
Right.
And I remember thinking, what the fuck is going on? And John Carpenter directed Sophie's Choice 2. No, I'm kidding. He didn't. But thank God. But so then he does the Spider-Man movies. And Spider-Man 3, we all know the story is about, basically the studio is directing him to put Venom in the movie. I don't want to put Venom in the movie. It's a nightmare production. And this feels like the ultimate palate cleanser for Sam Raimi. Okay, I'm done with the superheroes. I'm done with the studios interfering with me. I'm going to go back and make an old-fashioned movie that I know how to make. demons, possession, quick camera cuts, tons of gooey, gory, wormy violence. And yeah, it's going to be a sub 2 hour gross out fest.
Yes.
And I loved it in the theaters. And I actually don't think I loved it rewatching it, but I definitely liked it a lot. And I think that this is like the adopted half brother of the Evil Dead trilogy. That's how I look at Drag Me to Hell.
Not a half sister?
Possibly. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. It's funny. I say that because Alison Lohman goes through so much punishment in this movie. She sort of fills the Bruce Campbell role. And it's funny because, like, you mentioned all these other movies that Sam Raimi had done before this, and this is actually his 14th film. I mean, he's definitely a workman's director. He's always working. And when I was going through his filmography, there's a couple of movies that he wrote that he didn't direct before this, too. And I also just always wanted to mention he did all those like Xena and Hercules shows too in the 90s. And you can always feel his style in those shows, and you can see people that are in his movies in there, especially like his brother. He co-wrote this movie with his brother, and he had written the script for it with Ted Raimi about 10 years prior to them going into production for this movie.
Was this with Ted Raimi or Ivan Raimi?
Oh, I'm so glad that you called me out. It's
Ted
Ivan. I think he has two brothers, right?
Yeah, Ivan is I think his older brother, who he does a lot of the writing with. I think he did Army of Darkness with Ivan, and and Rob Tappert produced this.
Right.
That was the unholy trinity, was Tappert, Bruce Campbell, and Sam Raimi on the Evil Dead movies, producer, actor, director. So it really does feel like that. Like Bob Tappert produced all of Xena and Hercules. I'm pretty sure Bob Tappert is still married to Lucy Lawless.
Oh, good for him.
Who she obviously, full circle ends up on Ash vs. Evil Dead. So,
Awesome.
So it's a very insular group, but they always do things together. I actually read on IMDb that the medium in this movie is named for an older Raimi brother who actually passed away tragically.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, that makes sense because her name is kind of odd.
Sander, I think, something to that effect. And they had an older brother who drowned tragically, and so that was like a nod to their older brother.
Yeah.
But yeah, and of course Ted Raimi has like a career as this like prolific B movie actor, appears in everything. He's actually the guy at the beginning of Candyman whose girlfriend goes upstairs and gets killed.
Yes.
So he's also selling drugs in a drive-in movie theater at the beginning of Blood Rage, the Thanksgiving horror film.
Oh my God. Yeah, I love him. He was Joxer on Xena too. He's just a fun, goofy guy. He's in Spider-Man. So the woman that you're talking about, the medium, the actress's name is Adrienne Barraza, and then the character's name is Sean Sandena. And I was kind of confused because I was like, Sean, that sounds like usually when you have like a person doing a seance and she's like, Hispanic or whatever, it's like, oh, her name would be like Contessa or, and like, I was like, Sean, that's a weird choice, but I guess that makes sense. It's in honor of that brother who passed away. So a few more things behind the scenes before we jump into the movie. I read that elements from this movie are drawn from a British horror film that's called Night of the Demon, and that is an adaptation of an M.R. James short story. Now, I've never read any M.R. James, but I've heard his name. The short story is called Casting the Runes, and some of the things that are in that story that are in this movie are the 3-day curse, and also like the idea of like using a cursed object, which of course is the button in this movie.
Yeah. I was going to say, because I think Night of the Demon, if it's the same Night of the Demon, there was I'm actually, you can see my head is turned. I'm looking at my TV. On Screenbox TV now, they just put out like a classic movie, Night of the Demon, and I think that might be the movie you're talking about. It's like, here, Night of the Demon. A group of students head into the forest to investigate a series of Sasquatch attacks and discover a sex cult. I hope it's that movie because I'm going to watch it. Yeah,
Man,
it was made in 1980. So if that's the movie you're referencing, like hell yeah, like sex cults and Sasquatches, let's go.
Danny's got some homework he wants to take on. And then one last thing that's kind of interesting is that Elliot Page, who would have been Ellen Page at the time, was cast as Christine Brown in this movie. So like,
I read that. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, she was great in
Hard Candy.
He was great in Hard Candy, Inception. Like there's tons of genre films that he was in. So it would have been. I think it would have been good casting. Alison Lohman, though, I wanted to bring up two things about her, and I'm sure you are going to reference these. First of all, she does most of her own stunts in this movie, which is insane given the physical toll that she has to go through.
Yeah.
And second, like, what the hell happened to Alison Lohman? She was like an it girl for a while in the early 2000s, like that first, like the aughts, right? That's like the naughty aughties. Is that what they call it? Like
Sure.
She was in Big Fish. She was a big part of Big Fish.
Yeah.
She played the young, like the Ewan McGregor, right? No, Albert Finney as a younger actor. That was like the girl that he was in love with. She was in Matchstick Men with Nicolas Cage.
Right.
And that was like a fairly decent hit. I remember seeing that in theaters. That was a weird movie.
Yeah.
And then she's in Drag Me to Hell. And then like after Drag Me to Hell, her IMDb doesn't list her in anything for about 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And then I don't think she's been in anything since 2016. Maybe some people just give up acting. Some people, they move on for a variety of reasons. But I'm really interested to know, like, what happened to her, because she kind of kills it in this movie. She, especially when you find out she does her own stunts, you're like, holy shit. Like, they put her through the ringer here.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why I said it's a sister film to the Evil Dead movies, and I compared her to Bruce Campbell, is because it very, very, very much is like Evil Dead 2, where it's like funny and there's like ridiculous stuff that's happening to her. And as an audience member, you're sitting there saying, like, I can't believe they're doing that to this person. I can't believe they're doing that to this character. I can't believe this actress filmed these scenes. I mean, there's multiple scenes where, like, either this old woman or the old woman's corpse is like latched onto her with the open mouth. There's like bugs dropped on her. There's fluid dropped on her constantly,
Yeah, it's like a nonstop barrage of fluid and goo, yellow, green. It reminded me of Evil Dead, Evil Dead's 1 or 2, where I remember reading that, like, there are parts of Evil Dead 2 where they use like black or green instead of red for the blood or the bile or the goo, because they were trying to like get a better rating. But then there's also parts of Evil Dead 2 where he like saws his hand off and blood sprays all over his face, or Jake gets pulled into the attic, into the cellar, and blood just shoots everywhere.
Right.
So, but this movie, like you said, there's at least 5-6 moments where you're going to be watching this movie going, oh, like,
yeah,
like the corpse like latching onto her face and like green, like bile coming out of her mouth, like
And it's funny because like they're able to do a lot more, because this is when they're using digital effects versus the practical effects of the Evil Dead movies, and you can still kind of feel that sort of early 2000. I mean, I know it's not the early 2000s, but it's like we haven't hit that kind of sweet spot yet where special effects are pretty seamless. So there's this one part in particular that stood out that was pretty bad, I thought, when she drops an anvil on the old lady's ghost and the eyeballs pop out. I thought, I mean, first of all, it looked like a Looney Tunes gag.
That felt like a cutscene from Army of Darkness.
Right.
But also, I wanted to bring that scene up because who has an anvil set up like that in their attic?
Yeah,
Like, just in case a mouse runs by, I'm going to cut the cord so the anvil crushes the mouse. Like, it's the most cartoonish setup for things, and you overlook it because it's Sam Raimi, because this is the type of movie you're watching. Like, this is, while there are serious aspects and there's like actual conversations to be had about the topics of this horror movie, it's also there is a lot of slapstick-y type of action and violence in it. Like the scene where she goes to visit, the scene where she goes to try to apologize, and they're having the funeral, and she ends up like falling, and the corpse falls on top of her, and the goo. It's like, it's disgusting, but it's also hilarious. Like, how is this happening? Come on.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned that you watched this with your daughter, and I feel like this movie is actually a perfect gateway horror film. When you watch it for the first time, you're like, oh, I can't believe what I'm seeing. Oh my God, it's so over the top. And the audience just went nuts when we watched this movie the first time. But watching it myself, I was like, I could have shown it to my daughter too, because there's really like barely any cursing in the movie. The gore is like kind of bizarre, cartoonish gore. It's not like sort of realistic gore that would make you think about realistic things. There's nothing sexual in the movie at all whatsoever. So, I mean, I think it's a good movie to begin a kid's horror obsession with.
You know, just to give you an idea, Charlotte's reaction when I put the movie on, she went, "Oh, it's PG-13." I said, "No, don't do that." Yeah. Like, there's plenty of great PG-13 horror movies. That's always like a Twitter hot take topic. Like, oh, I can't believe, I hate this movie already. It's rated PG-13. Like, dude, Raiders of the Lost Ark and Jaws were rated PG. Okay, like some of the movies that fucked me up the most as kids were not R-rated movies. I'm looking at you, Superman 3. Yeah. Like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is like partly what required the PG-13 rating to happen. And I still am skeeved by that movie. The bug scene, the dinner table scene, you know, golly ma, like reaching into it. Like that's not PG-13 level shit. Like, come on. But, you know, I told her, I said, stick with it. Trust me, it might not be Evil Dead 2013, but this movie will remind you. And even stylistically, like, you can tell if you've watched the Evil Dead trilogy, this movie is filled with those Raimi, quick jump cutting to, you know, like, you'll be standing in a room and it's like I think of Ash in Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, where it's like a noise and it's like jump cut. It's like the clock, the goat head, the moose head on the wall, you know, the mirror. And it's just all these crazy jump cuts. And this movie comes back to that for the first time, probably since Army of Darkness with Raimi. You have, you know, all this like projectile goo and liquid flying around. You have, I mean, the woman herself, what's her name? Lorna Raver, who plays Mrs. Ganesh. Ganesh. She looks like a human deadite.
Absolutely.
And she's made to look like that. Like, if you didn't know who directed this movie, that gives it away. Like, the way she's with the eye, and she just looks like she's going to walk up to you in the middle of the street and go, "I'll swallow your soul." Like, with no makeup added. And so you have like, you have this woman who is a deadite looking woman. You have there's, when they go to the seance scene, you have like, you know, the holy books that are they're trying to read stuff out of these weird old texts to stop demons. I'm like, this is a member of the Evil Dead family, and it's a welcome addition. It really is.
Yeah. And you know, it's funny because you mentioned before how it's like PG-13 and we shouldn't mock PG-13 horror movies. I know that there's homages to other movies in this movie. The most obvious one I can think of is at the very end when she's in the grave with the old woman's corpse and it starts to get flooded. And I mean, that's like straight up Poltergeist right there at the swimming pool, right?
Another PG classic.
Right. And then, like, I know that there's other homages to horror movies as well. I didn't pick them up as easily as I did with Poltergeist. But I mean, obviously, like the car from Evil Dead, the car that like Sam Raimi puts in every single movie. That's it. That's the old woman's car in this movie. I was going to say that I've always kind of heard that there is a bulimia subtext to this movie. Have you heard that?
So one of they do make references at various points to how Alison Lohman's character was on a farm, and like Ganesha's daughter, or the woman who answered the
Granddaughter.
door.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's like, you used to be fat, huh?
Right. Right.
And obviously there's a lot of projectile vomiting in the movie, but it's not. It's usually other characters trying to throw up into her mouth and not her throwing up.
And I said bulimic, but maybe I should have framed it as eating disorder. I think it's eating disorder.
Yeah.
Because there are quite a few moments where things get shoved into her mouth. Even the old woman's fist at one point, she shoves it right into her mouth. I remember that really freaked the audience out when I first saw it. But there's references to it too. Like she doesn't want to eat in front of Justin Long's parents, and it's like, well, obviously she doesn't want to eat because she says like weird shit in the cake. But that's like a metaphor right there. Then also there's one part where she's eating ice cream and she's really upset after she got attacked by the lamia. And he's like, oh, I thought you were lactose intolerant. She's like, I don't care. And then at the very end, I think this is actually maybe the funniest part of the whole movie, is that she eats like this big sundae that's in this bowl, this like glass. And then the waitress comes by and she's like, give me another. Almost like she's a guy asking for like another beer. She's like, hit me with another. And the waitress is like, are you sure? And she's like, yeah. And it's like she's talking about an ice cream sundae. I thought that was so silly, but I loved it. It's so over the top as a movie, and it's completely charming. And she absolutely sells it. I know I keep going back to this point of comparing her to Bruce Campbell, but like that's why it works, is because you are with her this whole movie and you're rooting for her. And just like Ash, you feel bad for her, but then she also does things that are kind of bad, or you're like, oh yeah, she kind of deserves something, like something to happen to her now. So it's not like she's just a straight up asshole, and it's not like she's just a straight up innocent person. She's basically an innocent person, but she has some asshole tendencies.
Yeah. So one thing I read on IMDb that I don't think I would have picked up on, and again, this is me being a 40-year-old man at this point.
Yeah.
But apparently, like you brought up the eating disorders, apparently another criticism of this movie was that apparently the idea was they thought that it was like, this is what happens when a woman tries to get ahead, because her character is, her character is a loan officer at a bank and she's trying to get promoted. And the whole reason this movie really kicks into gear is, she kind of feels like if she gives this woman a loan, then her bank manager is going to think she's weak-minded, and he's going to give the promotion to some other schnook at the bank.
Yeah.
And so she like stands up for herself by turning this woman down and like proving that she's got what it takes. And then like basically the movie's going, well, this is what you get for trying to get ahead in life. We're going to, curse you and send you to hell. You should just be happy with your, and again, like I know Raimi took a lot of shit for the tree rape scene in the original Evil Dead. And I know that he toned that down, and believe it or not, with Evil Dead 2. Like there's even a scene where Bobby Joe, Jake's girlfriend in the movie, gets like attacked by the trees, and they specifically don't do a tree rape scene. And even Evil Dead 2013, where they do a scene like that, it's actually more toned down than the 1981 version, and Raimi was a producer on that. So I don't know if that's like, if that was an intent going in, or if that was like, we just need to set up our story and this is the most logical place to do it. And then, we live in a world today, this was 2009. We live in a world today where you don't need to do anything for people to decide that you're, an asshole with a message that you had no intention of sending out.
Yeah.
So I don't, it could be, there are plenty of things to this movie where like you could dig deep into the socio-political aspects of it. But at the end of the day, the movie is called Drag Me to Hell.
Yeah.
It's a Sam Raimi horror movie. and you just kind of, I feel like you kind of just got to go along with what you're watching. Like,
Yeah.
chances are Sam Raimi in a movie called Drag Me to Hell isn't setting out to make some like loud anti-woman political point, you know?
No.
Yeah. So it's
see that kind of even bothers me because it's like, even though horrible stuff happens to this girl throughout the whole movie, just the fact of like letting it be like, oh well, there's a female kind of contemporary to Ash in this movie. That's basically being as equal as you possibly can. You know, we're not gonna like go easy on her because she's a woman. You know, we're gonna like really put her through it, just like we would put Bruce Campbell through it. And I see what you're saying with like, oh well, she's trying to get ahead. In the very beginning, there's this one scene where she's talking to her manager, and then the other guy shows up. The other guy, let's see, I have his name on here. Stu Rubin is the character's name. He's played by Reggie Lee, and he's the one that's also gunning for the same promotion that she's gunning for. And the boss is like, hey, when you go out, could you pick me up a chicken wrap or something like that? And he's like, hey, could you get me a chicken wrap too? And I feel like the scenes with her in the beginning before she's cursed are kind of similar to the scenes with Peter Parker in Spider-Man 2, where like he's just sort of dogged on in the beginning of the movie, like just by being Peter Parker. And I think that that's just something that Sam Raimi does. And you know, you want to make a movie that's not like a bunch of high school kids in the woods. You want to make a movie that's with like an adult woman, and so she's working in a bank. You know, it's like it could be a guy in the same exact role, you know, but it's just that it's this girl. So I think that like,
well, that's kind of what I was thinking is like if Mrs. Ganush sat down at Stu Rubin's table, he was even more bloodthirsty for the job. He's gonna like get rid of her immediately.
Right.
And so and then the whole movie, and he proves throughout the movie, that character, that he's like a weak-minded piece of crap.
Right.
And so he, you know, I don't think the movie would have been any different. In fact, I think the movie would have been shorter because I think the Lamia would have gotten him so much quicker.
That's a good point. And actually, with that Stu character, what's interesting about him is that he folds like a deck of cards, even when she just sort of goes to expose him. And at the very end, when the boss finds out about him taking that information to another bank, the boss is like, well, once he started crying, he revealed this. Like, he obviously caves very easily. But this girl, Christine, goes through horrible, horrible stuff, and she's able to kind of pretend like she's all right for most of the movie.
Yeah.
You know, so I kind of wanted to talk about a couple of key scenes because I think they're just so interesting and unique. One scene in particular I keep going back to as we're discussing this is when she goes to meet Justin Long's parents. So one thing I also want to point out is that Justin Long is kind of like the antithesis of his barbarian character in this movie. He's like super caring and loving and supportive. He supports her through the whole movie, no matter what kind of crazy shit happens to her. And we go to meet her parents, and it's kind of weird. Like, this movie definitely feels like it's from a different time. Because, like, when Justin Long is on the phone with his mom, she's like, oh, is that the girl from the farm? You know, you might want to be with a different girl that has better standing. And it's like, we don't even, like, talk like this anymore in movies in 2023. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so Justin Long has these two parents, and they're obviously wealthy. And they have these airs about them, and she sits down with his parents, and she's got this cake. Christine's got this cake that she would have made on the farm, and the cake kind of looks gross, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the mom just kind of looks at it and she's like, "Oh yeah, sure." And they're going to eat this cake, and there's a fucking eyeball in Christine's piece of cake, and she stabs the eyeball with a fork, and it's just like so gross and so over the top, but. That's the appeal of this movie. You know, did you like that scene?
I did, and like on a strictly character level, that was like another thing to kind of counter the this movie is trying to tell like women to just stay in their place. I really thought the little bit of character development where Justin Long's mom is just like kind of grilling her incessantly, and the one thing that Alison Lohman does, Christine does to like kind of turn the tide is she's like, yeah, well, you know, I don't talk to my mom that much anymore. She's an alcoholic.
Right.
And Justin Long's mom, where like, he's like, oh no, like she revealed this dark side of her past, and my mom's going to be embarrassed. All of a sudden, the mom was like, "Oh, yeah, my parents struggled with alcoholism. It shows a lot of character that you brought that up." And like that becomes like, had she not freaked out about the eyeball and the cake in the next scene, you kind of feel like that was a turning point where she would have been accepted by these like upper class, like, elitists. And I thought that was like a really interesting, like it shows like her character, like her like not giving a shit about like who these people are. I'm gonna be me. I'm gonna be like where I came from, and like kind of like real recognizes real, where like the mom is like, oh, okay, I'm impressed that you had the balls to say that, like, um. And she even then she turns to Dan. She's like, all the other women he brought home never like would have admitted that. And I'm like, oh Jesus. But so yeah, I did like that scene. I thought that was like a good scene. That scene also comes after like where she thinks she might have been freed from the curse.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like and then there's the other scene that I love in this movie is, because to me it's peak Raimi, is the seance. It is.
Oh yes.
If you for any reason did not know who directed this movie, that scene is, and this is a true story because I sent this exact text message to my sister last night. My sister is the type of person who, when she watches a horror movie, she watches it with a pillow so that she can go like this and cover her eyes and cover her ears while she's watching it. She's a scaredy cat. We went to see this movie in the theaters, and the seance scene begins. And I lean over and I whisper to her this exact line. And this is the exact thing I texted her last night. And I said, guess what movie I'm watching? And I texted her this. And she goes, oh, Drag Me to Hell. I said, if this goat starts talking, this is the greatest movie I've ever seen.
Nice.
And that scene starts. And it's basically a cutscene from the Evil Dead franchise.
Yeah,
you have the crazy Raimi jump cuts. Or the cutting with the zooming in on random things. You have the possession of the seer, the medium gets possessed, and then that gets transferred to the guy. Then it gets transferred to the goat. The goat turns and starts talking, and and you're like, yes, like this is like the moose head in Evil Dead 2 turning and laughing at him, and it was the most Raimi scene. I think I remember like applauding in the movie theater when the goat started talking, and like my sister started laughing because I had said that to her. And it's just Charlotte loved that scene.
It's so fucking well shot too, because it's all like kinetic. It's just one thing after the next, and it doesn't stop. It's it's not like there's a pause and everyone looks around. It's like the guy, the woman gets possessed. He goes to go touch the goat. And then the guy misses, and then they cut the goat. They cut the rope that's holding the goat there off, and so it's able to get away. It's so good, and I don't, it's just some kind of actor that probably does like circus work or something like that. But he's up there like dancing around like a character from Evil Dead.
That was right out of Evil Dead 2 also. Like the whole Dead by Dawn.
Right above the fire. Yeah, I couldn't remember what happened to that guy, because I'd seen the first one like in 2009. But I was like, is he going to go on fire or something? What happens here? But basically, it's resolved to where you think that it might be done. And then we haven't even mentioned the fortune teller guy at all in our review yet.
Yeah, I liked him also. Dilip Rao is the
Dilip Rao, yeah, and the character's name is Ram Joss. And Ram, after that great sequence, he says, hey, basically we were able to get rid of this creature from the seance, but we haven't gotten rid of the curse. And he reveals that if you take this cursed item, which is this button from her sleeve, then give it to someone else, they will be the one that suffers. And I really like, because she's like, well, why didn't you tell me this in the first place? And he basically says, because then like you'd be responsible for someone being sent to hell, and I'd be your accomplice. And I think it's great setup, because it makes the movie not really be dependent upon like, oh, she's going to get away from the monster. It's more like now she has to make this morality choice. Who does she give this to?
And that transitions into that restaurant scene where she's sitting at the bar in the restaurant, and she's looking and she sees this like old man on a respirator, and she's like, well, she's wrestling with the, well, he's going to be dead soon anyway. But
Right.
it's like, it's not just like somebody dies, it's somebody dies and their soul goes to hell and is like tortured for eternity.
Forever,
So,
yeah.
and it really is a great, because she is totally like, I watched this movie and I was actually thinking about this, like, how much of a victim is she in this movie? And I think she's basically totally a victim. I really do. Like, she doesn't do anything particularly egregious to this woman in the bank that would necessitate a hell curse being put on her.
Right.
Like the woman's family doesn't understand like modern day capitalism. And it sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks. But you know, she's like she's not the person who makes the grand decisions. And I know she tries to take responsibility at the end where she's like, I could have given her the loan. But, you know, that's like saying, you know, we're teachers. We teach the curriculum that we're given. And if the principal says, I want you to do this, and then we follow through on the principal's orders, and then we get fired, or you know, we put ourselves on the line because of the things that happen in our classroom.
Right.
But those things are being sent down to us from above. You know,
Yeah.
like, could you imagine daring to show the pornography like Michelangelo's David in a classroom?
Ah, what degenerates! Yeah, to show
I
that.
But like, I really do kind of feel bad for her, and even at the end where she's like forced to make this morality decision.
Yeah.
And I think the movie does such a good job of then going to the, can you give the gift to the dead? And then it leads to that amazing cemetery scene where, like you said, the channel's poltergeist. It's this like digging up, and it's the most disgusting and gross, and the bodies everywhere. And all of it sets up this great misdirect at the end where it turns out, of course, that the envelope she's been trying to give away, it has Justin Long's quarter in it, and the button that has the curse was mixed up in the car, which they do foreshadow very nicely.
Right.
But then after that graveyard scene, I think you do kind of forget about that.
Of course, yes.
And
absolutely.
So it's just this really awesome scene.
Yeah. You know, it's funny though, right? Is that you said that she's a victim and that, like, you know, she really didn't do that much. One thing I also point out is that the old woman, this is the third extension she's asking for her mortgage. So it's not like she's like this old woman that, like, the first time this has ever happened, she doesn't know what she's doing. It's like she's asked for an extension. This is her third time now. So it's like she's clearly not changing her life or doing something better to not have to ask the bank for a huge favor.
Yeah.
So
she's also kind of, at her funeral or at that like ceremony in the house, there apparently is a large number of her family members there that could have supported her financially.
Yeah.
And they even make the point, like, your daughter is here. Why don't you go live with her daughter? Why don't you go live with your daughter? Oh, I'll never be a burden to her. Okay, but you'll be you'll curse. You won't burden your daughter by spending the last few years of your life at her house, but you'll send a woman to hell, to rot in hell for eternity, for not giving you a third loan on your mortgage. Like it. So this is why I fully support Christine Brown. You know, Alison Lohman's character in this movie. Yes. I feel like she kind of gets one of the ultimate royal screw jobs in horror movie history. Although it does provide for an amazing ending, like one of the all-time like best shocking endings to a movie that you could get.
Yes. I think that we should totally talk about that now. That's great. So you've already kind of talked about how she has the button, the cursed button in an envelope. She's in Justin Long's car, and he stops short because they think they see the old woman. It's this other random old man who's just saying, "You're going to hell," right? Just walking by. and she drops her envelope, and coincidentally, he happens to also have an envelope with a quarter in it that has the same shape as her button.
But
And so
I do just want to point out they do a great job of setting that quarter up as this kind of Chekhov's gun throughout the movie, where like multiple times, at least 3 times in the movie, he brings up how he's a nerd that collects coins. The fact that she works in the bank gives her access to, you know, the coinage that comes in, and like she finds the coin for him in the bank. He brings it up at the dinner table to his dad. And, you know, his dad's like, how's the coin collecting? And he goes, oh, thanks, Dad, for calling me a nerd at the dinner table. But actually, she got me this brand new quarter that, you know, is really historic and it's very rare. So they do a really good job of like if you didn't know until the end what happens, it's kind of this weird thing they keep bringing up through the movie. But it's really a good job of kind of planting Chekhov's gun off to the side, reminding the audience of it, and then really paying it off at the end. Because like that quarter is a plot point throughout the movie from the very beginning. And so it makes sense that he would have it. And, you know, there is the car that stops short. All the papers get mixed up. And, you know, a button, a quarter, both small circular things, and if they're in an envelope, why would you think one was the other? You know, you're not like, you know, nobody's going to be like, well, the density of this envelope is a little much. It must be the button and not the quarter, or vice versa.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe I would have opened up the envelope, make sure it was the right thing before I stuck it in the old woman's mouth, but whatever, it's fine. It's all good. I still, like you said, that you liked this movie a lot, and you maybe liked it more when you first saw it. I actually think I liked it more seeing it the second time around. I was like, yeah, this is a lot of fun. But let's talk about that end scene itself at the train station. So the lighting itself seems different. It's kind of funny because it reminds me of like the end of the Matrix trilogy, where like the whole trilogy is green and black and dark and shadowy, and then once the film is over, things are very bright and it looks like a new dawn. And that's the way it feels like at this train station. It's like this new dawn. They're like at Grand Central Station or something, and she sees this new coat, and that goes along with your, you know, you're saying Chekhov's gun. We could call it Raimi's coin, right? Raimi's quarter. Once again, another piece of Raimi's quarter here is that she buys the coat. That way, Justin Long can say, oh, you got a new coat. Or she says, I got a new coat. And he says, oh, well, I got the button. I was thinking we could put it on your coat again, right? And so it like sets that up. It's not just like this random thing that he blurts out. And then a train comes by, and I forgot that there's a train coming by when she gets dragged down like that. And so basically, it's like he can't even grab her or like try to pull her up as she's being dragged into hell. And I remember this like so distinctly when I first saw it, but as she's being dragged to hell, like her face kind of goes back a bit and her eyes bulge out. And I just remember that even though it's kind of CG and looks a little dated now, it's still very shocking, I think. And the movie ends on this kind of like, you're taking that last breath of like, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah,
you
jump cut
Justin
the title
Long.
card.
Right. You and Justin Long at the same time going, you know, and that's it. Yeah, so it's very perfectly done. I mean, how'd you feel like with your sister when you saw it in the theater?
I remember when like the hand comes up out of the, like when she's on the train tracks and like you see like the hellish hands come up. I remember going like, oh fuck, like I can't believe they're doing this. And yeah, it's like the special effect is a little dated, but it also like the idea that like the second the hands of hell touch you, like your skin starts to like melt away and burn away, and you're like basically like a husk of your former self, but you're still alive as you're being dragged. It really makes hell seem like hell. Like it, you know, there's a lot of movies like I always bring up Supernatural because I feel like Supernatural. Charlotte is watching Supernatural now with Athena. Athena's doing a rewatch.
Yeah.
It's going to probably take it until Charlotte finishes college because that show never ends.
I agree.
But like every character on that show dies, goes to hell, and comes back. And they're like, hell was really bad. And you're like, was it? Because like you're pretty much the same guy. Like
Yeah.
you have no markings on you at all.
Right. Right.
Like, and it just feels like in a lot of fiction, especially supernatural style fiction, like Evil Dead type stuff, like hell is just this like place where it's talked about and you don't want to go there. This movie makes hell seem like actually fucking hell. Like biblical hell, where the second you are touched by something from hell, you're on fire, your skin is sinking back and you're being ripped in, and now that is going to be your eternity of just torture and pain and suffering and burning. And this movie does probably the best job I could think of off the top of my head of showing that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I agree with you on that one. Yeah, and it's funny, like with Supernatural, I think like the very first time that Dean goes to hell, they do a pretty good job of making it seem like he is just like broken after that. But then yeah, then they just kill people and bring him back, kill people and bring him back over time. Um, yeah, I mean, that's the whole idea of this movie, drag me to hell. And I think that Raimi does this fantastic job throughout, just making it seem like how miserable it can be, because she's essentially tortured throughout this whole movie. The Lamia is torturing her, and you know, what's cool about it too is that everything from hell you never see like straight on, right? Like the Lamia, we always kind of see as shadows. The stuff from hell, we just see hands, right? The
yeah,
most we actually see of any kind of monster is really just the old woman who's kind of like a vessel for the evil. Otherwise, everything else, this hell that you were talking about, we just like see little glimpses of. And that's something I think that also deserves, Raimi deserves some credit too, is that for the Lamia, for the most part, we just like see its shadow and we might see like something move past on the window, but it really gives a sense of dread throughout the whole movie.
there's that one scene that I loved where she's in her house and outside her door you see like the hooves, the cloven
Yeah,
hooves,
yeah,
like step down in shadow, and you're like, oh fuck.
yeah,
And yeah, great use of shadow, great use of sound also.
yeah,
Like the scene like right at the beginning, right after she's cursed. It almost feels like the very beginning of Evil Dead,
yes,
when Cheryl, after she gets out of the woods, and you start to hear the join us, but nobody else can hear it. And right before Cheryl gets possessed, there's a lot of like really good sound work there that's creepy as hell. And this movie does that also. Uh it's I think this movie is, like we mentioned this with Evil Dead 2013. This is kind of a movie that falls under the radar a little bit. And I think it's because there's two generations now of Sam Raimi fans. There are the Sam Raimi horror movie fans, and there's
right,
the Sam Raimi comic book fans. And if your first exposure to Sam Raimi as a teenager was Spider-Man, then chances are you weren't running to the movie theater in 2009 to see Drag Me to Hell. Chances are because we don't watch comic book movies very often because of the director. The comic book movies are because of the stories that the comic book movies are based on. Like, the whole beginning of the MCU, the whole first four phases, or three phases, is all about the Infinity War saga, the Infinity Gauntlet saga with Thanos. And like, I didn't care who directed Civil War or Black Panther or any of these movies leading up to Captain Marvel. I didn't care who directed those movies. I wanted to see the characters and I wanted to see how it all fits in on the way to Endgame, like on the way to Infinity War, on the way to Endgame. So Sam Raimi, if you grew up watching Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2 and that trilogy, chances are you weren't running to the theater to see this. And now he's returned to the MCU, to Marvel. He actually directed Multiverse of Madness, Doctor Strange 2, which was the most Raimi of the MCU movies. But even that movie, like, yeah, we picked up on a lot of those things. Bruce Campbell is in the movie. The Delta's flying by in one of the scenes. Like, there's a lot of homages to Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness.
yeah.
but the mainstream MCU audience won't pick up on those things, and it won't matter to them. It'll just be Doctor Strange 2.
Right.
So they are not going to run out for his next movie the way we might. And
right.
I think that's just an interesting thing about him is, he kind of exists in these two universes at once, where he's like the patron saint of gory demon horror. And then he's also that really awesome comic book director who did the first two Spider-Mans and then returned for Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what happens is that, like, I have another channel, Comic Books Transformed. And so I talk about comic book stuff the way I talk about horror stuff with you. And it's like they kind of go hand in hand. Like comic books, role-playing games, metal music, horror, kind of like it's the same kind of person. And Raimi obviously has interest in a few of those. It's interesting, too, that, like, Drag Me to Hell came out in 2009. Then he has Oz the Great and Powerful. That's his 15th film. And then there's nothing for a while.
Until Multiverse of Madness.
And I know I wanted to bring this up at the very end of our discussion that there actually is talk of a sequel to this movie, to Drag Me to Hell. So I'm very excited. Yeah, one of the last things I read was in 2023, like pre-production was starting for Drag Me to Hell sequel. So I'm excited about that. But what I wanted to say was, you mentioned in Spider-Man how, like, there wasn't a lot of the Evil Dead kind of stuff in it, but I kind of disagree. There are a lot of those sort of Raimi zoom-in shots in each of the Spider-Man movies. Like, one thing I can think of in particular, the one that everyone kind of references, is the Dr. Octopus, like, origin scene, right? Where, like, the doctors are working on him, and that's very much like a horror movie, that scene, right?
Yeah.
And then I actually thought about, because when you're watching Spider-Man, obviously Drag Me to Hell hasn't come out, so you're just thinking about Evil Dead and Army of Darkness. But when we were watching Multiverse of Madness, I was thinking about this movie because there's the scene where Wanda, the good Wanda that's in this other reality, is like in her kitchen and she's getting possessed by the evil Wanda from our reality. And I was like, wow, that's just like Drag Me to Hell. Like, I think you even see something kind of go by the curtains at one point. I'm like, that's like the Lamia, right?
Similar to the little doily floating in the garage.
Yeah.
That's a great scene also, where you kind of see the outline of the woman in the back seat, but it doesn't jump to it right away. Instead, it goes back to her following that doily around the car, and then it's the jump scare. Yeah, this movie has a few good jump scares. It's a great little horror movie. It could stand alone, but because of who directed it, it feels like it's part of a bigger, universe, in a way.
Yeah.
All right, speaking of universe, and you brought up role-playing games, are you and Brian on Comic Books Transform going to cover Dungeons and Dragons, the new Dungeons and Dragons movie? Because I'm actually interested in seeing that.
I'll cover it with you if you like. I don't know if Brian's that interested. I made him go see Shazam, and I think he was reluctant to see it. So I don't know if he's going to see that. And I still want to see John Wick 2. I haven't seen Scream 6 yet, man. So,
oh, my God.
Yeah.
I actually reached a point where I looked at my Regal Unlimited, and I'm like, I've seen everything in the movie theater except for like 65 with Adam Driver, which I heard is really bad considering that. And I'm just like, all right, maybe I'll catch it some other time. I don't know. But yeah, I've pretty much seen it. Like John Wick 4 is maybe one of the top 5 action movies I've ever seen.
Jesus.
Really freaking loved it. I have a feeling John Wick 4 can be the Top Gun Maverick of this year, that like action movie that ends up getting a few random Oscar nominations towards the end of the year.
Okay.
Like maybe for like cinematography and editing and things of that nature. It is gorgeous to watch. Like, I actually want to go see it again because I was a little tired when I sat down. It's a long movie.
Yeah.
So I want to like be awake fully and go see it again.
Yeah.
Speaking of seeing things again, you and your wife, Sherry, covered Yellow Jackets, season 1.
Yes.
And season 2 just started, correct?
Friday it dropped on Showtime, like their streaming service. Sunday it's going to drop. Today it's dropping on their channel.
Oh, okay. So I am just making my way through season 1. of Yellow Jackets. And I
Yeah,
thought
man.
what we could do is maybe do what we did kind of for
Raise my
Interview with a
wolves.
Vampire,
Oh, okay. Sure.
where we do like a one episode of the Lasser cast where we do like a recap of season 1,
Sure.
and then we do like a episode 1 of season 2 breakdown, and then we can cover it every week, because all I heard for a year was this was like the best show, the modern day version of Lost, and
Yeah.
I'm hooked 4 episodes in. It's some of the most riveting TV. It feels very much like season 1 of Lost,
Yeah.
which I am a devoted lover of only season 1 of Lost.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really loving the show so far. I love the cast, so I can't wait to talk about that with you. And as far as our march to the Evil Dead Rise,
Yes.
what else were you thinking of covering? Because if we're talking Raimi, I was thinking we could go back. I don't think we've ever covered Darkman, and that's one of my all-time favorites.
I just got a dark boner over here. I'm excited, man. I haven't watched Darkman in a while, but I love Darkman. Yeah.
Darkman is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Yeah.
I feel like when you look at Liam Neeson's career, it's like Darkman, Taken, and in the middle, he's like, I'm going to be a great actor.
Yeah.
But like before and after, he's like, I'm going to have fun in genre movies.
Right.
So we can definitely cover that. I know you've mentioned Bubba Hotep, which is a Bruce Campbell movie about a demon mummy, not exactly Evil Dead, but in that universe. You know, if we're talking Bruce Campbell, that's got a Lansdale connection, I know, and that's there's been multiple Lansdales on our channel before. So yeah, I'm just excited about our march to the Evil Dead Rise, or Evil Dead Rise.
Yes, I'm super excited too. I'm actually going to meet Joe Lansdale in person next week at Book People in Austin, so I'm pretty excited about
sweet.
that.
Nice.
Yeah, the guy who wrote Bubba Hotep. Yeah. So, yeah, dude, Darkman. Oh man, now I'm excited about next week. But if you guys are excited too, make sure that you subscribe to our channel. Danny puts out content constantly on here, and we always meet like once a week to discuss whatever is the big thing in horror. I just
put out, before we go, I just put out a YouTube short on a German horror movie called Holy Shit. Which I had to explain to Pete was the actual name of the movie. It's imagine 128 hours meets phone booth. Guy is locked in a porta potty at a construction site. He's impaled through the arm. He can't move. The construction site is about to blow up, and he's trying to get out of there. It's really gross. It's awesome. It's on Screenbox TV. I think everybody should check that out.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. That's actually a super intriguing concept. Okay. Now I know about it. All right. Yeah. Well, you guys go check out his video on Holy Shit, and we'll bring you guys some shit next Sunday or